Well, hello everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever's appropriate for you. Welcome to our webinar on Maximizing Configuration Manager for the Modern World. This is part 3, Best Practices for Enterprise Software Deployment. Just in the event you have missed parts 1 or part 2, they were on what's new in Configuration Manager and then deploying and managing Windows 10. And I'll talk about those others in a second. My name is Wally Mead. I'm a Principal Program Manager with Cireson. Been with Cireson about 3.5 years after 22 years at Microsoft, primarily in the Configuration Manager product group. And with me today is Phil. Phil, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Absolutely. Thanks, Wally. My name is Phil Schwan. I'm a solutions architect with Netrix. I've been working in the Windows desktop space for about 20 years now, most recently here at Netrix. So excited to be part of the webinar today.
Very good. And Jay is out of the office today, busy in other parts of the country. So it'll be Phil and myself taking you through our content for today. So hopefully I recognize a number of names in the list of attendees. So some of you are repeat offenders as far as joining us. So hopefully you've been getting a lot out of these webinars. I know it's been enjoyable on our end of things, presenting these to you and giving you some hopefully good information that can help you out. So just a couple of housekeeping items before we get our session underway. You guys are in listen-only mode, so you're not going to be able to interact with this verbally, but if you do have questions, which we highly encourage that you do present any questions, go ahead and go to the questions panel in the GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar interface and go ahead and type those up, and we'll get to those later on throughout the presentation, more likely at the very end of the presentation. I don't like to get distracted by seeing them throughout the presentation. So please do ask questions, whether it's on the topic of today or other topics in Configuration Manager space, and we can do our best to help you out. And as I mentioned, this is part 3, if you happen to have missed parts 1 or part 2, they were recorded, and you can get those up on our Vimeo channel. That is vimeo.com/team Cireson, all one word, and you'll be able to find part 1 and part 2 that Phil, Jay, and I have done for the previous webinars, as well as other webinars that we've done. And this one is being recorded. Let me verify I did hit the start recording button. Yes, I did. So we are recording. And this one will be posted up there probably tomorrow, and you will get access to it as well. All right, with that out of the way, our topic for today is enterprise software distribution. So to cover that and our best practices for that, I'll kick it back over to Phil and let him do his presentation about Netrix and then some ideas on software deployments and configuration manager. And that means I need to go ahead and make Phil a presenter. Will be a good thing to do.
All right. So thanks, everyone. As Wally said, I'm with Netrix, as I introduced myself earlier. Just a little quick background on Netrix. We're a Microsoft managed partner. We do a lot of work across several different spaces, and in particular, the Microsoft practice. So we do a lot of things around Windows 10 deployment, configuration manager deployment, really anything that touches the end user workspace. In particular, the part of the practice I'm in, the end user computing space. So that extends not only into traditional desktop management, but into also the more modern management using Intune, Azure, Autopilot, those sorts of technologies. So from an application deployment standpoint, just to kind of take it at a basic level for those who may not be familiar with Config Manager. Config Manager, originally SMS, has been doing application deployment for a very long time, so it's a very mature product in that respect. Application deployment, I remember early days consulting, we were actually using VB scripts and PS exec and doing all sorts of custom logging just to be able to mass deploy software out into a large organization. And the whole purpose around the software distribution portion of products like Config Manager is to make that easier, to give you robust and repeatable processes that will ensure that the application that you want gets out to the machines that you want in a timely manner. Starting with Config Manager 2012, they moved into a little more robust model for that. So traditionally, application deployment was, we have a setup executable or an MSI file. We run a command line. We cross our fingers and we hope that whoever packaged it did a good job. And we wait for a return code to come back and assume that everything is good if it comes back 0 and move on our merry way. With the new application model that was introduced in Config Manager 2012, it became a lot more state-based. We were able to do a lot more dynamic things around that application deployment. So for example, with the detection methods that were put in place, if we go and we target a machine with an application, probably the first thing we want to know is that application already there? It doesn't make sense to run an install for an application that's already there, and quite often, depending on how the application was packaged, it could actually have a detrimental effect because it could overwrite user customized settings with whatever the defaults were for the application package. So it's not something that we necessarily want to see. So with the introduction of detection methods, we can actually look and say, is this MSI product code installed? Does this file exist? Is it a certain version, minimum version? Does this registry key exist? Can we run a special script that not only checks for those things, but also may look for particular customizations that we may have put in a custom action in an MSI transform file? So looking for a very robust set of criteria to determine, is the application already there in the state that we want it? If it is, then we'll simply return back to Config Manager and say, everything's great. We've considered it a success and we're going to move on. If it fails that detection method, then that's when we can go ahead and we can run the installation based on the method that we've specified. And then once that process that we've executed returns back to us, we have a couple things that we can do. We can take different actions based on the return code. So if it's a 3010, we can go ahead and initiate that reboot. Or if it's another custom return code, we can actually put in custom actions around that. But more importantly, we can also then leverage that same detection method after the fact and ensure, did it install properly? Quite often, as is quite often the case, and I've seen it many times with software distributions, the process itself will return back a return code of 0 when actually not everything that we wanted to happen happened because whatever the process was didn't handle it properly. So it gives us a lot more flexibility and assurance that the application that we want is actually going to be there when this process is complete. Moreover, there are some additional things we may want to check when we do an application install. So our application may require certain prerequisites in order to function properly. It could be .NET, could be Java, could be any number of applications that are or helper apps that are required for that application to run. So we want to make sure that those apps are installed prior to running our app install. Otherwise, the app install may fail or it may install in an unstable state. So we can establish dependency relationships between applications in Config Manager and ensure that those apps get installed ahead of time. We can either just simply stop the install before it happens if they're not there, or we can actually automatically install those dependencies. And of course, those dependencies are all also subject to the same detection methods and so forth to ensure that they install properly. Also, something else we can do is evaluate runtime, any requirements that may be necessary. So we may have applications that require a certain minimum OS version or certain minimum drive space or any number of things that must be in place before we want it to install. And rather than relying on inventory and collection evaluation and other things to determine the machines to target ahead of time, we can simply allow those things to be evaluated at runtime as a much more efficient part of the process. The application model also delivers apps in more of a service type model. So at the end of the day, when we want to provide our users with applications, we're simply providing them with the utility to do their job. And most users are not really concerned with how they get their application or what the application delivery method is. They just want the application itself so that they can do their work. So when we deliver an application, we can actually differentiate between different use cases or different platforms and deliver it the most efficient way possible. So a common example that I often give is with Office. So from a Microsoft Office standpoint, we may want a user who is a back office user to have that application fully installed on their primary workstation. But if they're roaming around to other other machines, say that they're in a healthcare environment and they're roaming around to computers on carts in healthcare areas, clinical areas, we may not want a full Office install on those machines, yet we want it available to them if they happen to connect to that machine. So we can simply advertise to them or deploy to them Microsoft Office, but we can actually differentiate between different deployment methods. So we can give a full MSI install or a full executable install, and from a requirement standpoint, say install this if it's their primary workstation, and then also provide something like an app-v virtualized version of Office, and only install that if it's not their primary workstation. So in that case, we're advertising or deploying one application. It's Microsoft Office, but we actually have different methods of providing to it, and we can determine dynamically which of those methods they're going to get when the application is delivered to them. So one of the things I want to do is take a look here at some of the more advanced features that have recently come out that kind of piggyback on some of those things we just discussed. And the first of those is Office 365 and the ability to do client management of O365. So much as with Windows 10, Office has moved to a more service-oriented model where it's continually updated on a regular basis. And from an IT perspective, we simply want to have a certain level of control over releasing that and telling or determining which level of updates our users get and how often they get updated. And so more recently, there was an addition in here to be able to manage those Office updates. Oops, wrong one there. And be able to actually manage the Office install directly from within the console. So rather than having to use the Office customization tool or Office admin tool separately and package this all up and everything outside of the console and then import it right at the end, we can do a lot of these options right from within the console now. So if I want to go from our dashboard here and actually create the installer, let the wizard come up here and we'll create a new one here. And we'll give it a location. And we'll drop it right in there. And so I can go through and much as with the customization tool, I have options around being able to either manually specify what things I want in the client, or I can actually, if I've already done this before and have a preset number of settings in a configuration.xml file, I can import that here as well. So we'll go ahead and say we want to manually do it. And then here's where we have the option to be able to determine, do we want Office 365 Pro Plus, or 365 Business, etc. We can choose as well which of the applications that we want included, as well as the non-traditional Office products as add-ons and so forth. So I'll go ahead and I'll uncheck access because nobody wants people to be DBAs. Come on, uncheck it here. There we go. And we'll say they don't need publisher. So as I move on, now I have options around being able to determine, do I want them to do 32 or 64-bit, and what channel specifically do I want them to use? So let me back out here and drop this down. So you can see here we have the current channel, a deferred channel, and then a first release and a first for current and for deferred. So you have multiple options in terms of how you want to manage the frequency with which your clients get those updates. If you want to add more languages other than English as well, you can do so. And then you can specify certain properties ahead of time. So automatically accepting the end user license agreement, automatic activation, and so forth. And so once I've made my determination on those items, I can go ahead and actually create an application deployment right away versus just letting it create the package and not doing anything. So if I wanted to go ahead and specify a collection, add it to a distribution point and so forth, I can do that all right from within here, the same as I would a normal application deployment wizard. So in this case, I'm going to tell it no and just let it go ahead and create that application. So what it's basically doing in the background now is it's pulling down the Office 365 client from Microsoft directly and placing it in that folder that we specified. So if I go in, and we'll see it's already starting to pull those files down as we go there. So And then in turn, for managing those updates going forward, I can also do the same as I do with Windows 10 servicing and actually create a servicing plan, or in this case, more properly termed an automatic deployment rule directly from within the management console here. One additional thing that you'll need to know is in order to enable this, you actually have to enable management of Office 365 updates from within the client settings policy. So if I go ahead and tell it to create a client settings policy, I can actually do a custom one. It'll take me right to there instead of having to go into administration. And if I go to software updates, and I'll zoom in here. And right here we can see enable management of the O365 client agent. So that enables us to manage this, not only the deployment, but the servicing of O365, of the Office of O365 client using Config Manager. So I'll go ahead and cancel out of there. Another new thing that they've added, and we took a look at it briefly in the first webinar. We'll take a quick look again here. Is the ability to run scripts against machines. So typically, with the new application model being the primary mechanism for deploying applications proper, you still had a legacy packages model that would allow you to do more fundamental execution for tasks. So it was best used for things like utilities or other things that we wanted to deploy out to workstations en masse, but we didn't really necessarily need to have it be state-based or have it be dynamic in terms of its delivery method. So up until recently, if we wanted to run a PowerShell script or a VB script against multiple workstations, we had to create a package for that and a program and call it. And we had to make sure that we called the right PowerShell executable if we were running in 32 versus 64-bit, depending on what our script was. But now, directly from the console, we can actually define scripts and run those scripts against workstations out in the environment. So in this particular case, I'm going to take a look at one that I've created, just a very simple one for enabling AppV on a Windows 10 workstation. There's a very simple PowerShell command to do that, enable-appv, and so we're going to run that script against a test machine. So if I pull up my test machine and log back into it, because I've been sitting for a little bit here. I'll pull up and take a look at what the status is of AppV on this particular workstation. Get the status. As soon as it comes up here. There we go. So if I look, we can see that the AppV client is not enabled at this point. So we'll go back to the Config Manager console real quick, and we'll find my workstation. And let's go ahead and run a script against that. So we'll select the enable AppV script that we have. Go ahead, tell it to do so. And then we'll jump over to our monitoring and make sure that it's running here. It may take a second. Well, we'll wait on that for just a second here. But while I wait on that, I'll preface or prep the next piece that we're going to look at. So we talked about the ability to evaluate some things at runtime using requirements and see if it met the requirements we needed for it to be able to run a particular application install. And there we go. And we just see now showing up in the console that it did run successfully. So if we jump back over to our machine and check our status again, and I must have hit the wrong machine. Live demos. All right, I'll carry on with the other portion here, and we'll come back to that. So again, the ability to evaluate at runtime certain criteria to make sure that things are the way we need them. Well, one common one that has been missing from that requirements capability is whether or not there was an executable running that may affect the application install. Of course, a very common one in this case is Internet Explorer. There are many applications that don't install properly if Internet Explorer is running. And traditionally, just with SCCM out of the box, you would have to rely on the installation method itself or on some sort of custom scripting or something like the PowerShell app deployment toolkit to be able to handle applications that may be running that need to be terminated before an app install can happen. Most recently, they have now added the capability to called installation behavior to accommodate that and to look for existing running applications. So if I go into, take a look at 7-zip here, and just suppose that 7-zip, the installer, doesn't run well if there are certain applications that are launched. So we'll go into the properties of our 7-zip installer, and we'll look and we'll say, as it turns out, we can't have Notepad running when we go to install 7-zip. So we have that installation behavior configured there. So let's go to our machine that we have this deployed to, and let's say that Notepad just happens to be running. And so I'll go ahead and I'll run the installation here. And what we'll see is it'll come back and it will fail to do the installation, and it will notify us why it failed. So if we take a look here, we can see the installation failed because this particular application is running. To install it, we're going to need to close it, and then we'll rerun the application from Software Center. So we'll do just what it says. We'll go ahead and save my work and close it, and we'll retry the installation, and this time it should go through successfully. So there is a behavior to be aware of in this particular case, and that is if you make an application available, it's going to fail and it's going to prompt them. However, if you make that same application required, it will actually forcibly terminate that process before continuing. So something to be aware of in terms of behavior. So in this case, in the interest of time here, I'll just go ahead and wrap up. But those are some of the newer application installation behaviors that have been introduced, as well as just kind of a general overview of the paradigm under which application deployment is done from within Config Manager. So at this point, I'll turn it back over to Wally.
Very good. Thank you, Phil. That was fantastic. So you got to see a couple of the new things that Configuration Manager makes available to you. And these are in the application behavior, the install behavior that Phil showed was a pre-release feature. It was a tech preview feature for a while, then it came into the code. It's now a production feature, release feature. You just have to enable it in your environment. And the run scripts is a brand new feature that we just added in 1706. So yeah, some of the great reasons for being up to date in your Configuration Manager current branch environment. As far as some of the other best practices, what I like to tell people is, you can read all the stuff Microsoft has in their documentation up online. They have best practice sections, and they like to tell you what they feel best practices are. But realistically, your best practice is going to be whatever works for you. As Phil mentioned, Config Manager and SMS have been around for a really long time, especially the packages and programs, or what we used to call legacy software distribution, has been around for 20 years. And you guys are all really familiar with it because you've been doing it for a long time. So with that, if that works great for you, then fine, keep using it. However, Phil did mention a lot of the cool things that the product group added with the application model being state-based. You have the detection methods, you have the requirements, so that your detection and evaluations done on the client, not on the site server, not in collection evaluator, not having to rely on hardware inventory. So a lot of great advantages there to the application model. Now for those things that are quick hitters that you need to do right now, the run scripts option may be a fantastic resource for you to get something to run right now that traditionally you would have done packages and programs for. But again, the bottom line for software distribution best practices are you can watch presentations, you can read documentation to see what other people are saying. Yeah, learn from those, but find out what works best for you in your environment and use that. As you know from those of you that have been using Config Manager for a lot of years, one of the cool things about it is that there's not usually just a single way to get something done. There's oftentimes multiple different methods that you can use to accomplish the goal of getting software deployed or supporting your end users or whatever the scenario is. So that's great. You can find what works for you, what you're comfortable with, what makes sense, that accommodates all your requirements, and use it. But then be willing to adapt. You'll find that as you go along, you'll find new features that are added to the product, or you'll hear about something that somebody else did or showed you in a presentation that, hey, that was kind of cool. So be willing to go to your lab and test that out, get familiar with it, and see if you can then implement it in your environments. So just being willing to adapt your procedures and your processes so that you can learn and get with the times as things move forward. So very good. So we'll move off of that now. So now let's go ahead and talk about how you can do some of this software distribution processes that Phil talked about, utilizing a web-based portal that we call the Cireson portal for Configuration Manager. Just a couple of quick slides on Cireson. We started a software and services company about 6 years ago doing consulting on Service Manager primarily, but all of System Center. Started creating some applications that become that first thing on your slide, Service Management, to give you some great capabilities to enhance Service Manager from an end user perspective as well as your IT analyst perspective. Then we got into asset management because you all know that Config Manager has a ton of great data in it, but you can't really manipulate that data very well. So this allows you to take your Configuration Manager data, such as your hardware inventory, bring it into this Service Manager database, and allow you to add in contractual, financial, warranty status, location codes, cost values, along with those hardware and software assets. Configuration Manager, we've been in that for a couple of years now. We've got 4 free apps that are available to you. We got a couple that are really, really popular, the Remote Manage app, which you may very well be using, as well as our Ticker app, a couple that are very, very popular, biggest downloaders from our website. And what we're talking about today is our Cireson portal for Configuration Manager that I'll show you momentarily. Just some stats about us as a company. We're in, I think it's 65 countries now worldwide for our customers are spread around, lots of consulting hours, although we prefer that you guys go with one of our partners, such as Netrix, to go ahead and get that work done through them. And then lots of licensed end users, but we're really proud of the renewal rate. So we're finding that the 99% of our customers renew year over year. And those that don't wind up being customers that decided to get rid of the, no longer use the Microsoft Service Manager platform and move on to some other platform. And just a few of our different fans, as we call them, but our customers in different industries out there. So you can find whatever industry you're in, and there's going to be some sort of a customer out there that's using our technologies and very happy with it. And lastly, where we fit in the stack, obviously you see System Center in the middle, and almost all of our products, about 99% of them, sit on top of System Center. The only one we have that doesn't is kind of a password reset utility we have. If you don't want your help desk being bothered by password reset requests by end users, we have a self-service solution for that that doesn't require any System Center. But the rest of our technologies do require System Center, such as what we're talking about today, the Cireson portal for Config Manager. So what its goal is to make your life easier as a configuration manager admin by allowing you to extend the reach of Configuration Manager throughout your IT enterprise. So I was in the Microsoft product group for a number of years in Configuration Manager, and I worked with a lot of TAP customers. And one of the most common requests we got when I was at Microsoft is, we want to have a web portal. Because everybody's moving to web portals. They think there's a lot of advantages to it, which we'd agree with. And the product group just always had other priorities, things that are more important to them to create. So finally, we've created a web portal. We think it's very intuitive. So if you are here for the first time and you hadn't seen the other parts that we did where I demoed other pieces of the web portal, you'll see it today. We think it's very, very easy for your IT staff to go ahead and get their jobs done using what we have here. So very intuitive. It's a web portal, so you're not tied to an installation of the Configuration Manager console that you have to keep up to date as Config Manager releases these new builds 3 times a year. We like to grab the data that's available in Configuration Manager that we think is necessary for your IT staff to go ahead and have access to in an easy, quick manner so that they can get their jobs done, which is supporting the end user, getting the software deployed, reinstalling the operating system, whatever the case is. Configurable security so that you get to control which members of your IT staff have access to which features of the Cireson portal for Configuration Manager. And you'll see that as we go through here. Not only do we like to make that data from Config Manager available, we want you to be able to do some additional tasks like creating software, topic for today. You want to be able to create packages and applications within the Cireson portal for Configuration Manager in an easy to use process, but not just create them as you normally would in the Config Man console, but make it easier for you by enhancing that scenario. And what we talk about here would be something like templates would be one of those ways we enhance that process. And you'll see that as I go through my demo, it's very easy to create software or deploy software by loading a template, which will then preset all those values that you already have, that you know that you have to implement in your environment to make something work properly. Now, if you were here with us last week when we did the Windows 10 deployment and migration scenario, I actually walked you through the Commence solution. So Commence is our OSD bare metal front end. So if an IT staff wants to image a box, whether it's a bare metal box or re-image a box for an end user, this provides a hopefully intuitive for you interface to walk through that deployment process, giving you some interaction with the deployment process of a new operating system or a refresh of an operating system, giving you some controls with that. Again, configurable security so you can control who has access to utilizing Commence and then what features, what operating systems they have access to. Now, obviously, as Phil mentioned in his presentation, you always want to do reporting. What's going on? Did my deployment work properly? And we have a couple of different areas there that can help you out. We have dashboards that we think are easier for you to find the information you're looking for your deployments. And I'll show you those momentarily. And then reporting. Sometimes you want a detailed report. But as you know, Config Manager has close to 500 reports now in the console. You don't want to have to wade through those 50 some different categories of reports and then the X number of reports, whether it's 3 reports or a dozen reports in any single category to find what you're looking for. What we allow you to do is pick and choose those dozen reports that provide value to your business, link those into the CMP so when you go to the reporting section, all you see are those reports that you need to have access to. And then using the configurable security, you can control whether Phil sees all reports or Phil only sees those 2 reports he needs to have access to. Now, with that said, and I think I mentioned this in previous webinars, our Cireson portal for Configuration Manager being a web-based intuitive interface, it is not a one-to-one feature replacement for Configuration Manager console. So you as a Config Man admin, you're not going to stop using your Configuration Manager console and switch over to the CMP as your normal course of business. Yes, there are times where you will utilize or be able to utilize the CMP to get your job done, but you're still going to have features in Config Manager that aren't exposed yet in the CMP. Where we really target the CMP is those middle 3 personas. Your service desk analyst who wants to look up a user's computer, wants to see software that's deployed to that computer, see software that's targeted to that computer. Look at the hardware inventory to see if their hardware is supporting that software that they want to have access to, then deploying that software. Your desktop server support team. Those are going to do a lot of the same things as your service desk analyst, just in a upper level tier. So an escalation scenario, plus they may be the people that are creating your software for deployment, or maybe they're going and they're the ones that are doing the operating system deployments. Your IT management, they don't need to have access to the full Configuration Manager console. They just want to see what's going on. So they want a dashboard. They want to have a report or a set of reports. So it's very easy to customize the CMP for your management. So when they log in, they'll see the dashboards. They can see what their deployment status is. Maybe you give them the deployments nodes they can drill in. But more importantly, they probably want some reports. And end users are happier because of the fact that their issues, their tickets that they raise are resolved more quickly because we made it faster and easier for the service desk analyst to find the information they need and get the job done, supporting that end user and resolving their issue. Okay, with that said, let's jump over to a demo. And what we're going to do is go through software distribution. Oops, I went a little bit too far there. Let's swap over here to my demo environment. And there we go. Okay, so this is the Cireson portal for Configuration Manager. I'm showing you the full admin experience just so I can set the stage for the next demo I'm going to do for you. So this is the full admin experience. This will be our dashboard. So a couple of cool things that would be related to your software deployment scenario would be looking at the total number of computers you have. So I have 6 computers, I have 9 users. This is coming from Config Manager. But probably more important for me is going to be the client health rate and client activity rate. You obviously can't deploy software to a client that's not healthy. You can't deploy software to the client that's not active. So these are giving you a pretty good value as far as a quick glance at if management comes to say, hey, how quickly can we deploy this software, whether it's a patch or a new definition or something to my clients? Well, I see that I got 83% right now in my environment that are healthy and active. I have 1 VM that of those 6 is not turned on. So I should be able to get 83% of my clients within an hour, whatever my policy interval is. So that's kind of good information to know. And then the next thing to be really beneficial for you is down in the lower left is our deployment status information. And so right now I can look at this and I can see that I have 5 deployments with unknown status. And I'll show you what that means in a moment. I have 1 that's successful, and I have 1 that's in an error condition. Well, looking at this, I probably don't need to look at the green one. So I know that there's 1 deployment that's successful. I don't really have to look at that too much. I'm probably going to concentrate on this guy down here that's in the error condition. That's the one I want to look at. But I have quick status here. Think about the Config Man console, going to the monitoring workspace and clicking on deployments, and then scrolling down, looking through that compliance column to see what you're at. This is kind of that, just bubble up as a summary view for you. Now, if I want to drill in further than that, we have a node here we call deployments, so I can click on it, and this will then bubble up and show me all those individual deployments like you would see from the Configuration Manager console. I guess I need to click on it. I click kind of in the middle. So again, think about the deployments node in the monitoring workspace. Right now it says I have no deployments found, but you see it's right now filtering on the last 2 days. So let me go ahead and go down to all my deployments. And now this is more of a graphical interface, a graphical view of what that deployments node is in Config Manager. So we've taken all the deployments, put them in one list for you, color-coded the status, and this color coding is showing you the worst case scenario. For example, you see I've got 1 that's in error condition. That's probably the one I want to look at because it's bright pink for error. I got this green guy down here that says success. I probably don't have to look at him because he's successful. Now I've got these other 5 that are in unknown condition, but if you see this first unknown one, which is the Config Man toolkit, it actually says 5 success on it. Now the reason we bubble up unknown is we're showing you what is the worst status condition. And I actually have 1 computer over here for that deployment that has unknown status. So that's worse than success, so we bubble that up as unknown for you, even though there are some successfuls on that. And you can just click on any of these color-coded statuses, or the software, or the collection, or the individual list of resources that were in a specific status category, and that will drill in further for you to give you your status information based on whatever node you selected there. So here's client 10, you can see is the one that's in unknown status for that piece of software. So that's my Windows 10 client. All the other ones would be in successful status. So we have that. Now, of course, we have the ability of seeing software, and I'll show you a couple things here before we move to my different persona. So you have different software views. So views are, the standard view shows you all your software you have. I have a view for just Microsoft software. I have a view for Cireson software. And I think I have another view for software that's not either Cireson or Microsoft. And you get to control which attributes are displayed. And you can see here what your status is on the far right-hand side. It shows me on my DP status. In this case, Zoomit is deployed or targeted to 2 different distribution points, and it's been successfully distributed to 2 different distribution points. If you want to see what those are, I pick my software, then down to the details pane, I would just click distribution points, and it shows me my 2 DPs. And I can see any linked MDT roles. No, this is not in any MDT roles. This is not targeted to any computers, and there's no deployments for it. So I have no targeted resources, no deployments, which makes sense. Now, if I pick a piece of software, I can deploy it if I have rights to, which I do as a global admin. I can manage my content. So if I decide I don't want that content on both my distribution points, I could go ahead and now say take member and remove that. So this sends a request to Config Manager to remove that content, just like you can do from the Config Man console. And of course, it depends on what your software is. You can retire it if it's an application. This is a package and program, so retire is not applicable. Delete it and change permissions, which people have access to seeing it. And of course, you have the ability of creating new software. So new software applications packages, which is going to be my scenario I'm going to walk through. So to set the stage for it, I'm going to go to my settings. I'm going to go to security settings. And I've got an application packager. My application packager is the guy that's going to create all my software. So I've created a security group in the CMP called App Packagers, and it just points to an Active Directory group. And I have a user 4 is a member of that group. So I've gone to security rights. Now I load that security group, App Packagers. And you can see right now, by default, he can't see software. He can't see anything. So this navigation menu over here that I'm hovering over would be completely blank for this guy. Well, if he's going to create software, you probably ought to look at it. So let's go ahead and give him rights to software. I want him to be able to create new software. So I go to the new, and now you can see he's got the ability of creating new software. I can let him create both applications and packages. If I only want to do the new app model, I can go ahead and turn off packages, but I want him to be able to create both. And I'm not going to give him access to any settings menus, but what I do want to do is give him access to all my software. So I'll just click the global rights for software so he has access to everything. So I'll save permissions since I made an update to this. And now I'm going to go ahead and log in using Chrome as user 4. And see if I can type my username and password correctly. And no, I don't want to save the password that I typed in. Notice the navigation menu, he only sees software. Doesn't see the dashboard, doesn't see deployments, doesn't see MDT roles or reports or events or users or computers. All I gave him access to is software. And right now he has access to the standard software view. That's the only one I've given him. I give him access to other views if I want to be able to filter things down. So he can go ahead and let's go take this piece of software. It's not targeted to any distribution points. Let's right click. Oops, I didn't give him rights to be able to deploy software or distribute content. Nope, he can just view software. I didn't give him rights to be able to manage anything, which is fine. So I'm not letting him modify anything after he's created it. Somebody else has to do the content distribution, but I could certainly give him the rights to do that. What I want him to be able to do though is create software. So let's go to new. Now you see how I got a software. And let's go ahead and walk through software application creation. So this, again, think about the process and configuration manager as you go to create an application, and think about the wizard. And you've probably done it numerous times. You can think about it in your mind as I walk through this one. So I'm going to go ahead and we can pick a target software share. This is kind of like when Phil was showing you the Office 365 installer, had to create a directory to download software to stage it, then get it out to distribution points. Kind of the same thing here. This is our staging location where we're creating our software, and then we'll get it moved from there to the distribution point. Now my source file, I'm going to go ahead and in this case, I'm going to go, let's say we'll make Google Chrome available to everybody. So I'll go to Google Chrome as an MSI. That's the most common way people are doing software nowadays. So it's an application type was Windows Installer. We pulled in the MSI. When I go to the General tab, notice that it pulls in the manufacturer, the application name, the version. Notice that it automatically created an install command and uninstall command for us out of that MSI. Notice currently, and by default, no distribution points are selected. If I go to the Requirements tab, notice that there's no requirement set here. So now let me show you the power of the templates to automate this process. I'm going to go ahead and select the template. I'll start with, for example, server applications. So I'll select it and I'll load that template. Now notice it's got one distribution point selected. If I drill down, nope, it's not the client DP member, so it must be the data center DP primary. So knows what distribution point to put this software on when I say this is a server-based application. By default, we're going to create a Windows installer detection method. I don't have any supersedents or dependencies placed in this template, so I could create them manually on the fly if I wanted to, or I could put them in templates as appropriate. Now, requirements, notice this did load a couple of requirements for me automatically. Since it was server-based template, I want to make sure it has a server-based operating system that I'm supporting, and in this case, physical memory. Now, let's just go show you what we could do if we change this to a workstation template. So let's swap and click load on that template. Still got one distribution point selected. However, it's no longer the server-based DP. It's now going to be the client DP. So as I tell it with the template what type of software I'm creating, it knows to go ahead and use the distribution points I've targeted in my template. I still didn't change my detection method. I didn't give it a supersedence or dependencies, but I did give it some requirements. And notice the different requirements, Windows 7 client and Windows 7 client. Oh, I don't need both these, so I go ahead and remove that. So I've got the ability of modifying or overriding any of the settings from my template. So now once I've all done with all those, I just walk through and finish off anything else. This can be deployed as part of a task sequence. Click finish. And now this has gone ahead and telling Configuration Manager to go ahead and create an application called Google Chrome as an MSI with the appropriate detection method, requirement rules, put it on the distribution point as appropriate. So now we scroll down through here. We don't see Google Chrome yet. Let's go ahead and refresh and see if it's done in Config Manager. And let me refresh one more time. It takes it a moment. We go through the SMS provider to go ahead and create that software. You can see it's created. You can see right now it's targeted to a distribution point, but it's not done yet. So we know that we have targeted there, and in Config Manager, it's in the process of distributing to that distribution point. Except for the client, I think a workstation when I ended up on, so it's my remote distribution point, so it's take a little longer. We can verify by clicking on distribution points. Yep, member. So that's my remote DP. It's not the one on my site server. So we'll let that guy percolate for a moment. Let's go and walk through the package scenario because it's slightly different for you. So I'm going to create a new software package. The wizard's going to look very much the same, just going to be fewer nodes because there are fewer things to configure on a package than you have application. So let's go ahead and select, let's get a different piece of software. Let's do DCM authoring tools, another MSI. So we'll go ahead and load it. Again, we read some basic properties. Let's go ahead and load a template. Same type of templates. I got server packages or workstation packages. This is going to be a server package, so I'll go ahead and load that template. Now, as I walk through the wizard, here's my package properties. Notice I don't have anything set here other than my data center DPs is the one that's selected, which is primary, is the distribution point. It's set here, but nothing else is set appropriately. Data access, nothing set there. Distribution settings, automatically download content from DPs. And on programs, if I go here and click on requirements, if I scroll on down, it should just be my server-based OSs like Windows Server 2012 R2. Oops. Hopefully, there we go. Yep, Windows Server 2000. I lost it again. There we go. Windows Server 2012 R2. And environment, remember admin rights, advanced, suppress program notifications, and task sequences allowed to be part of a task sequence when you're deploying. Now, if I go back here and swap this over to my workstation template, you'll see these values will change. So it's going to be a different distribution point now. Now automatically download is there. No different settings here that I can see. Persist content and client cache is now enabled. And then it's going into the client DPs as opposed to the server DPs. And on my advanced here, I don't have the program suppress program notifications enabled. And requirements, it's now going to be Windows client-based operating systems like Windows 7, Windows 8.1, and Windows 10. It's what's going to be selected as opposed to the Windows Server 2012 operating system. Now, what I do have to do here is I have to give it my command line. So we assume you want to have an install and uninstall program. So we're going to go to Browse for my command line and just go ahead and browse to the MSI file. And we're going to create an appropriate command line to install that, MSI exec/I, QN for silent. If you want to do an uninstall, you want to do the same thing, browse to your command line. It'll be the same executable, in this case MSI. But now the command line is going to have, when I click OK, it's going to have a /x in it. I lost it. Let me go and select it again, and then click OK. There we go, MSI exec/X. So for uninstall, and it gives the Windows installer product code. So very cool, very easy. So I just load that in. You can add additional programs. So maybe I want to have a program where it's an attended installation as opposed to an unattended installation. I can go ahead and create another command line if I want to, or remove one of these programs. And now I just click Finish. And that's going to go ahead and tell Configuration Manager to create this new piece of software again. So let's go ahead and refresh. Oh, you can see Google Chrome now has been distributed to our distribution point. 1 out of 1 now. And if we hit refresh and see if our DCM authoring tools is there, and again, it's being distributed out to our distribution point at this current point in time. All right, so I've gone ahead and created a couple of pieces of software, one an application, one a package. Now this guy doesn't have the ability of doing deployments, so there's no new software deployment. I can create software, I can't deploy software. So I'll just go ahead and switch back over to my full admin context to show you the software deployment scenarios. So now if I go to software, and there you see Google Chrome and DCM authoring tools. I have that. So let's say I want to go ahead and deploy software. So my common scenario as a help desk person might be, again, I get that call from Wally, and Wally says, hey, I want this piece of software. I don't have it on my computer. What's your computer name, Wally? I don't know. Are you on your normal computer? Yeah, I am. So I click on Wally, and it says that, okay, Wally, your primary computers are client 7. Primary? Oops, that doesn't make sense. You shouldn't be on primary. Let's go ahead and user device affinity that. I know you shouldn't be on the site server, so let's go ahead and remove that capability. Don't want you there, so we'll go ahead and remove Wally from primary. Okay, so now we do a refresh here. That should go ahead and let me go ahead and do another search on Wally. And that should remove primary if I did it correctly. There we go. So I'm on client 7. And I go to add remove programs. Let's see if this software is already there. Nope, it's not there already. Is it deployed? Nope, it's not deployed. Let's go verify my hardware inventory is going to support that piece of software. So I click on inventory summary. And I would go ahead and hardware inventory is pretty much up to date, just an hour and a half ago. So it's fine. You're a healthy client. My hardware. And again, think about Resource Explorer. This is scaling down Resource Explorer into the attributes we think are going to be beneficial for your service desk. How long the computer's been up and running. It's a virtual machine. Okay, there's a processor that's going to support the software. You got enough disk space. You got enough memory. Your operating system is good. That's all good. You can go here and verify in the software tab. Again, it's not currently targeted to you, or it's not currently installed, not currently targeted. Any services that might conflict with the software. Nope, nothing there. Go to the client tab. Network tab just shows you your network adapter. And I can see what collections I'm in. Software updates that are available, software updates that are applied. Okay, you got some updates to apply, but nothing is going to cause a problem with that client. So now I would go ahead and do a right click and deploy software. And most likely for a service desk scenario, do a quick software deployment. And I would hard code it, so that's all they would see. Now let's say it's that piece of software I just created. So that was Google Chrome. We wanted to have available to everybody. So click Google Chrome, add that in. Now we do allow you to add multiple pieces of software to your same deployment. So I could add multiple different applications. You can't mix applications and packages because they have different deployment settings, but I just wanted to have Google Chrome. So I'll just go ahead and add the one in there, but you can do that if you wish. Now, here's my client computer. I want client 7. I right-clicked on that when I did the wizard. And now go to next, and I have to load a deployment template. And this is going to be a workstation application template. And I want this to be as soon as possible. I can initiate the client policy download. That's that fast client notification channel for Config Manager. Click Finish. And this is now creating a deployment for me in Configuration Manager. So it takes me automatically to the deployments node in the CMP. When I hit refresh, it should have created that deployment now. There we go. Oops. Google Chrome right here. Google Chrome deployment. I have no status right now. So just to show you what happened in the background for all those, if I go to the Config Man console, if I go to software library, I created the application. It's not here in my applications list because I told it to store any applications created from the CMP into a separate folder just so I can control that. And there's Google Chrome. If I scroll on down there, you can see it's successfully distributed out to my distribution point. And then we created a package, and again, it's not in the packages node. Oops, yeah, I did a package, DCM authoring tools, but it's in the CMP folder. And there's DCM authoring tools, and again, it's distributed to the distribution point. So it did that for me. If I go to the monitoring workspace, here would be if I just wanted to verify my content status, I can go ahead and do that. But again, we already looked at it. So if I just click here, oops, let me go to targeted one. And there's Google Chrome. And then DCM authoring tools is right here. So we're all good to go. Now, I had it create a collection automatically when we did that software deployment. So it was a device collection. So there's CMP, there's Google Chrome install. All systems is a limiting collection. It's got one member in it. That one member should be client 7. That was a computer I added that collection. And if I go look at the collection again, here's my deployment. And my deployment has Google Chrome software going to that collection. And that template that I loaded was an available application. The template could have, if I would have loaded the server packages template or application template, that would have been set for a required purpose. So it'll do whatever you told it to do. So that is a very easy way, we think, for you to create your software and deploy your software through the Cireson portal for Configuration Manager. Now, if I just go back to my dashboard, just to tie this off, you'll see that now before it was 5 different pieces of software that was unknown, now it's 6, just because I don't have any status back from that brand new one I just deployed. So this would be your first stop, and then you would go to the deployments node and see the next stop to get the more detailed information. Now lastly, again, as a full admin, just to show you, I could also do software deployments down here. Remember when I looked at the app packager, it didn't have computer, deployment, task sequences, or MDT. But I could create my software here. I could also do my deployments. The last thing would be reporting. And if I wanted to load a report here, I don't have any reports that look to be all package and program deployments, application deployments. Yep, I got that. So I have a report available. I can just go ahead and run that report. But let's say I wanted a different report to make available to my users of the portal. I can go down to my software distribution and application monitoring or package and program status. And maybe I want to go and look at one of the other reports, just pick a report that I wanted. Application usage, application deployment, there you go, per asset. So load a different report in. So just link another report. And now to make it available to users, I just right click and do permissions. And that will then, I say my desktop support team or my help desk team, whoever is appropriate, just give them access to that report. Now when they log in, they'll see that report as well as any other reports they've been given access to. So very easy to control who has access to what reports, again, to be able to tie off the process that they've been going through. So that's it. You've pretty well seen the process for creating and monitoring software and then deploying it through the Cireson portal for Configuration Manager. Again, with the web-based interface, being able to control which nodes you have access to, which actions you have access to, should be very easy for you to help extend the reach of your Configuration Manager utilization throughout your organization. So as a quick summary before we close this off, so you guys have heard me say that in every one of these webinars so far. Configuration Manager is a fantastic product, or I have graded here on the slide, and that's the only reason I'm still doing it after 20 plus years is because I love the product. And realistically, you shouldn't be using anything less than current branch. That's really where you want to be because that's where all the new enhancements are going. They're not doing anything else with them, the older technologies. There are lots of different ways to deploy software using Configuration Manager. Phil talked about a lot of these different options for you, packaging programs and applications and scripts. Obviously, you can do software distribution through task sequences. That's fine, and it is supported with current branch. Configuration items and baselines is a way you don't think about traditionally for deploying software, but you can certainly do that through scripting in configuration items, or you could have an evaluation configuration item looks for the existence of an application, then deploy that through a baseline, and then create a collection of those results for those clients that don't have that application installed. That's easy to do. So again, as a best practice, is find out what works for your environment and then adapt as you need to become more accommodating to new advances in the industry and the different products. And then to help you extend the reach of Configuration Manager in your organization, you might want to consider the Cireson portal for Configuration Manager for deploying and creating and deploying software. If you like what you saw for the Cireson portal for Configuration Manager, you can use the URL on the screen and go ahead and download the community version. However, I'll warn you that the community version does not allow you to create software or deploy software. It's kind of a read-only version just to get your feet wet with it. You can create templates and set up your security settings and so on. And if you want to really try out software distribution, from that same link, you can request a trial key, and that will unlock your community version for 30 days and give you 30 days to try out all the features of it, including creating and deploying software. All right, with that, let's go ahead and look at the queue and see if we have any questions that we need to go ahead and handle here. And we have a couple of questions, so go ahead and type in more questions that you guys have available, you have right now that you want to go ahead and ask. Please go ahead and do so. So I'll read these off, even though Phil's answered them, just so we get them in the recording for those later on. So Mark had asked a question, existing application, what does that work for Office 365 as well? And Phil's response was, assuming that, actually, why don't you read your response to me? Makes more sense.
So I wasn't quite clear, but I believe that question came in when I was talking about detection methods and the ability to see if an application was already installed. And so Mark asked specifically about O365, whether it worked for that. Basically, you can use any MSI product code, registry key, executable file, or use your own custom script, if, as I said, if you have more advanced needs. One thing I did want to add on to that, though, is as we went through in the portal and actually in the console and actually created an O365 client deployment, it automatically creates a detection method for that application when it creates it. So if you look in, it actually points to the registry key. And it'll say, whatever that version is at the time you built it or greater. So the assumption is, after you install it, obviously it's going to continue servicing and the version will update, but it does automatically put a detection method in for the O365 client.
Yeah, I didn't mention when I kicked off and told you guys go ahead and ask questions and put a little context around it, just so we can verify. We can see the time, it's 10:06. It was very early in Phil's talk when you asked that question, Mark. So if that wasn't what you're implying or really wondering about, go ahead and type up a follow-up question there so we can hit that. And then Tavario asked a question about what version of SCCM you were using, and I kind of already answered that when I took over after Phil did, and I said, yeah, that was with the run scripts option. That was a brand new feature in 1706. So if you want to have the run scripts in your production environment, you do have to utilize 1706. Now, with that said, let me caution you on one thing. If I go back to my environment here and just kick back over to the Configuration Manager console, if you look at my software library, I don't have the run scripts feature here, and I'm running the same. This should be 1706. Let's just verify. Yeah, I'm 1706. And the reason I don't have it there is because it's a feature you have to turn on. So just to show you that, you'd have to go to Administration, Updates and Servicing, and then go to Features. And then in the Features, here you have Create and Run Scripts. This is a pre-release feature currently. So pre-release means the product group has deemed it good enough, so it's beyond past the technical preview type environments, but they don't feel they're ready to say, hey, everybody go ahead and use it on environments with 400,000 clients fully. So do some testing out in your production environments on it. So you do have to do consent to pre-release features, and then you'd have to go ahead and click this one and turn it on. So create and run scripts, you'd have to turn that feature on after you consented to pre-release, and then close the console, give it a moment, and then start the console back up, and then it would enable the scripts feature, both in the software library as well as in the monitoring node. You get the script status as well. So just be aware of that. So even though you may have 1706 and you don't see it, that's why, because it's a pre-release feature you have to turn on. All right, let's go back and see if there are any other questions. That is all it for questions. So this is your last chance to bring up any other questions you have. And apparently Mark got his question answered because he's left us. I know we are past the top of the hour and apologize for running a couple minutes late. You guys have been around my webinars before, and you know I don't think I've ever ended a webinar on time, so I should be familiar with it. But we'll hang out for another moment and see if there's anybody else has any other questions. If not, then it's been a pleasure working with you guys the last 3 weeks on these different webinars. Hopefully you found something beneficial out of it. When I do a lot of training classes, what I always tell people in the training is that if they can find one thing a day out of the training that they can take back and implement in their environment, then it's been a successful training class for you. So hopefully out of these 3 different webinars on what's new in Config Manager, managing and deploying Windows 10 deployments, and then software distribution, it's hopefully you found something in that you can take back and implement in your environments. And if so, then hopefully you felt it's been a worthwhile environment for you. Ken's asking, when are they going to bring back MMS? Well, there is an MMS, just not the one you're asking about. So there's the Midwest Management Summit, which actually is a very good conference. I really do like the MMS. It's not the same as the old Microsoft Management Summit. You don't have as many Microsoft people attending it, although the product group has started to send people there the past couple of years. So they're doing some more presentations, some more presence there. But I would highly encourage you to consider the Midwest Management Summit in Minneapolis. There's also, as another good event, IT Dev Connections, which is actually next week in San Francisco. They moved it from Las Vegas. And this was planned long ago before any issues in Las Vegas recently. And that's a pretty good conference as well. A little bit bigger than the Midwest Management Summit. They try and keep it small just for the intimacy and the ability of getting more access to other people and being able to talk to presenters and so on. But yeah, I don't think Microsoft is ever going to bring back their MMS because they were consolidating conferences and wanting to Ignite, the one big one for everybody. So that's the status on that one there, Ken. I know it says you were joking on that, but all right, guys, I see nothing else in the queue. So again, it's been a pleasure these last few weeks. Hopefully, again, you learned something into these webinars. And if so, then if you have, that's great and fantastic. If you have any questions or for Phil or Jay from Netrix, on our first slide, I'll go back to that first slide for you and get you back there. So you have our contact information. Oops. I guess I could have hit home and got back there quicker, but there you go. Our contact information is there. So feel free to email Jay or Phil or myself with any questions you guys have offline. We're glad to help you out, whether it's needing help from Netrix to do your deployments or upgrades or whatever it is, or questions on me on the Cireson Portal Configuration Manager, which Phil and Jay are very well versed on as well as one of our big partners on it. So again, thanks all for attending. Hopefully it's been a great 3 weeks for you. If this is going to be or has been recorded, and it'll be up on the Vimeo site in the next couple of days, so you can pass it off to somebody else or review any of our demos we did, or just listen again if you want, if you need help sleeping. So, all right, guys, thanks, and I'm going to end the webinar now, and we'll catch you guys in a future webinar. Thanks all. Bye now.